I like what you were I like what you were saying about the boundaries between objects. That's a good thing to discuss. I'd like to have done that, but it felt like we were going on to philosophy and not doing comedy anymore. But it's an interesting subject, and you know that's a good point because it's fine to say that objects only have a meaning to things outside themselves, but if there's no if there's no inherent distinction between internal and external,
Yes, yes,
then that's something to be
I think
ironed
it,
out. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think it's and part of the reason for the different topics. I mean, it's comedians or technology people and drugs, is that we can go off into all sorts of different things. But yeah, and yeah. I think I'm not saying that there aren't boundaries between objects, but they are perhaps um, less coherent than we sometimes lead ourselves to believe. In as much as that, yes, at the moment
Uh,
this is a pen that I can use to write, but it can then run out of ink and or it can be smashed up, and you know, sort of at the bottom level, we're all like, this is the really weird thing, is that we're all made out of this same kind of material of the universe, right? And uh, within the context of our own life, it's kind of like things seem consistent. Like, okay, here's a computer and a Zoom, and I'm talking to my friend Gil on the Zoom. But Zoom didn't exist before; it's sort of come into existence. In 100 years, both you and I will be recycled atoms going on that will be making up other
yeah.
things. Will be part of power stations or AI data centers or whatever will be the main thing that
Would you
exists.
say that the boundaries between a person and what is the person and what is not the person are any different to any other object? Um,
Mm, well, I think for
I mean,
example,
your life comes to an end. You're when you die, that's definitely the end of you. Let's assume it's the end of you in the spiritual way. But I mean, you know, your consciousness doesn't go on any art. That's a hard boundary for your consciousness.
I don't know. I mean, like I think if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I would. Even I think I just don't know. Like because it feels to me like this could be some strange simulation. Like again,
Yeah.
it's a bit like.
Let's hope it is. That's our best bet for God. That's our best bet for an afterlife.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's a bit like mathematics, in as much as like you can set up different axioms of mathematics and then you get certain structures out of it, and like so in our life you can set up certain axioms and we can sort of say, okay, right, I'm going to treat these objects as different and I'm going to use them in this way, and writing works and I can send a letter to my MP and that's going to have this impact or it's not going to have this impact or what have you, and we can sort of say, yeah, consciousness. I mean, it's I don't know if you listen at all to Eckhart Tolle, but I'm not presenting this point as agreeing with it, but there is a, well, and it's not just him. There's this the interesting thing about the universe, right, is our kind of Western scientific framework says is materialist, right? It's material first. It says that the universe exists in materials, and out of those materials comes life, and then more sophisticated life, and then human beings with consciousness, and that consciousness is defined by the experiences that they have during their life, and you didn't exist before you were born, and after you die, that's you don't exist. There's another interpretation of what we're experiencing, which is consciousness first, right? That says material things only exist because they can be consciously experienced. And I mean, there's all weird, sort of weird things in low-level physics about that, with wave particle duality and all that kind of weird this and the other. But the point that some spiritual folks make that we've got no evidence for, but you also can't disprove, is that the brain is kind of receiving consciousness like the way that a radio receives a signal, rather than generating it in and of itself. And that there is some sort of like pervasive universal consciousness of which we are kind of like little tiny
Yeah,
reflections.
there's pantheism that
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
a
there's sort of a
that everything is
pantheism
kind of conscious. Yeah.
that everything's conscious, and that kind of like effectively that all that we are is we are the universe playing hide and seek with itself. Like that the universe exists of a kind of like extraordinary consciousness that you might call God or something, and it is kind of omnipotent and omniscient and what have you, and like it exists outside of time, whatever, and it just decides to play with form, and it's like, oh, what would it, and then this is kind of like this illusion of separateness, the idea that you're Gil and I'm Sam. Like there's again, I'm not sure that I believe this. I'm just this thing has been presented to me, and I can't disprove it or prove it scientifically. You can wave it away as mumbo jumbo, but that, like, for example, that you and I, and indeed my wife, or the pigeons outside, we're all like fragments of the same underlying consciousness, just exploring what it's like to perceive, like, a strange and twisted universe from lots of different angles.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I don't know what difference that makes to living one's life day to
I
day.
used to
Go on.
I used to be really into this question, which is why am I me rather than somebody else?
Mm.
Why am I born now rather than because I can quite imagine a world in which Gil Gibbons is walking around conscious, having a life and everything, but I'm not that person.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
somebody else. That seems possible. It's possible to imagine that. So what is the fact which makes me being me as I am right now? You know, um, and I'm not, and that I don't, and I suppose in the end, I thought that that wasn't really a meaningful question. I'd sort of bewitched myself with that question. And that, let's say I could have been you and you could have been
Mm.
me, and that's a meaningful thing to imagine. All right. Um, then we could be swapping over a million times a second. I mean,
Yeah,
we wouldn't be able to tell.
yeah.
So it sort of becomes, it's easy to make it sound silly that it's something that sounds plausible and possible, but in fact you are you and could not be anything but you, really, in a
Well,
in any meaningful sense.
it's a weird thing because like you
Yeah.
can't prove that the entire universe wasn't just created a moment ago, right? It could have
Uh-huh.
been like like in some ways we kind of delude ourselves to say like, oh, we've got this science and we've got this explanation, like, but like science
Mm.
itself with the idea that basically the Big Bang, everything came out of nothing at some and then followed these laws to get to this point. Okay, yeah, I mean, maybe, but there's still this big miracle of like everything suddenly came into existence, and then you had exactly these laws that get us to this point, and then we're all these sort of like different fragments of consciousness. I mean, I think the only thing that we
Mm.
can be certain of, or maybe this is the argument, is that there is an existence, that there is a sense of something, and then beyond that, everything else is kind of conjecture. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of like I'm intrigued by people like Eckhart Tolle, and in fact, actually, a comedian called Paul Foot who talk about this experience of
Yeah.
kind of having lost the voice in the head, and effectively they've had kind of like an ego death, and then they now live in this kind of like beatific childlike state, and they're not assailed by a desperate voice in their head
Uh-huh.
saying, I want to become a funny comedian and I want lots of people to be like applauding me every night. And I mean, it's yeah, I don't. Yeah, what does it all mean, eh? I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like this is. I mean, if it's all right with you, I would like take this conversation we're having now and reinsert it back into the episode because I think it's. I mean, it's interesting stuff. It's interesting stuff to think about.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know how that it ends up affecting our day to day lives, except maybe just not to take ourselves so seriously, right?
There's no harm in that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, brilliant. Well, dude, thanks so much for.
I so rarely talk about philosophy. I don't talk about philosophy these days. It used to be all I talked about.
Yeah, yeah.
And nowadays not at all ever really. But I'd like
What
to.
was your what was
I'd
your
like.
book?
I think I need. I'd like to do a refresher though, because I imagine there's lots of interesting things happening in philosophy right now. Because when I was a student,
Mm,
the big thing is philosophy of mind.
right.
What is consciousness?
Mm,
What is it to be conscious? Can machines be conscious? That was a
mm.
big thing, and the big thing then was the Turing test. You'll
Yes,
know
yes.
about that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah. Well,
and
I've been an AI
and we
researcher.
weren't sure, and
Yeah.
now everyone's phone can pass the Turing's test.
Yes, yes. Very strange.
And no one thinks their phone's conscious. It's but I'm not sure what people are saying about it right now. So
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting
I've
times.
been
And we
out
should,
of it for a few
yeah,
years. Yeah.
we should talk again soon, dude. Yeah, hopefully I'll see you at one of these upcoming gigs. And yeah, I'd love to carry on chatting because yeah, philosophy. But yeah, the work tomorrow, and I do have one of these 9 to 5 jobs. So yeah,
And you look uncannily like the person I used to discuss philosophy with most of the time. It's kind of
there you go.
freakishly uncannily like the person.
Maybe
Uh,
maybe the whole episode was just an acid flashback.
who is the same person in my acid story.
Interesting, interesting, good stuff,
Maybe the
dude.
whole thing has been hallucinated between then and now.
That I will be so I'm so interested to find out what happens, after that death thing. Does it all just stop and it's like blackness, or are we like reincarnated, or we're united with the godhood, or I can't wait. I mean,
I feel pretty sure that we die and that's it. Because if you look at someone in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's, they're effectively dead while they're alive. And if you can be dead when you're alive, you can damn well be dead when you're dead. Yeah.
well, I think you should listen to Eckhart Tolle because I think he's got some
Yeah.
perspectives on that you might find intriguing.
Uh,
But I'll send you some links. Yeah. Anyway,
Another thing I think is that I'll say you've got to go.
no. Well, tell me the last thing, and then I'll go. Go on.
No, but I mean, most of your life is dead already. 99.9% of your life is already dead in that you know, you've got no idea what you were doing at 11:09 a.m. 3 years ago. All those moments are dead forever. They're all gone, and your memory bag is a tiny 0.001% of the life you've lived. All that big bit's already dead, and what we call death is just the death of that tiny 0.001% that's not dead yet. And the big bit that's gone doesn't seem to worry us very much.
No, well, and the interesting thing there is, of course, like Stephen Hawking's final theory, which you might be interested in, which is that the universe is a hologram and that time is actually just, that
Yeah.
like, you say that about your life is all dead, but actually,
I've heard about this hologram thing, but I don't understand it.
yeah, but basically what it means is that like
Yeah.
our our experience of like moving forward through time of this like is just one way of perceiving the universe, right? And so like it all already exists, future and past, and it's just that we're sort of like if you can imagine like a sort of a flicker of light going through a crystal, right? Like that's what it is. That there's it's just this like extraordinary thing like that. So it's kind of all. I mean, I have this idea recently that but oh, no, actually, I was just reading Logan Murray's book on humor, and he was sort of talking about where jokes come from. Is that jokes are a bit like prime numbers, right? Like the definition of a prime number, right? The only divisible
Yeah,
one in
yeah.
itself. And like, but so there are large prime. But there is a process where people discover prime numbers, right? They exist out there, right? They're already there, like defined by the axiom of mathematics, but they have to like use computers to count up and then double check and all this sort of things. And then they do this thing called the
Yeah.
sieve of Eratosthenes. And then they discover these prime numbers. Like, so they were out there, but then they're discovered, right? And like, I have a feeling that jokes are and indeed not just jokes, but people's personalities all exist in like, if you try to actually think your personality is somewhat like a mathematical function, right? That you react a certain way into a certain situation. I mean, I have a feeling there's an extent to which everything conceivable already exists, and there's like different kind of like patterns of consciousness flowing through the crystal of all possible existence, like creating different pathways of experience, if that makes sense.
So what is the sort of moving lens that moves through it to
Well,
see different parts of the crystal? What's
that
the
seems to be the biggest question. Why would of all the possible things, why would experience ever be restricted to some subset of the things? It's unclear. But
Yeah. But
but
if
there
you say why is it now, like it's whatever time it is now, it's what's
it,
9:27.
yeah,
Why is it 9:27 now rather than any other time?
well,
Why is it nine? Well, but isn't that like saying why is now? I mean, is it a meaningful thing to say why is it now? Why is what now? I mean, 9:27 is 9:27. It couldn't be any other time. It's 9:27. It could be 9:29. Then it
and there's
wouldn't
an
be
extent to which
9:27.
927 has been imposed, like before the invention of sort of clocks and counting time, whatever. The different sets of I think it's almost an extent to which our perception of time as being this is a like it's difficult in our I think in our modern Western scientific we say no this is the time, this is the time now, we're all experiencing like this. I think that there's an extent to which we are civilized into that belief, and we were at a point where we would say, oh, for example, if there's some bushman in Aboriginal Australia, it is actually also a time, he just doesn't know it. But then there's another way around that says actually that whole construct of time is something that's been imposed, and that actually there is something different going on that we can't see because we're so locked into our Western materialist division of time sort of thing. But no, I agree with you. Fundamentally, it's a big why do I experience my life in this particular order?
Yeah.
Like the universe is crazy and strange and what have you. What why? I mean, I had to do a joke about.
Yeah.
I feel it's badly designed. I would like to be able to experience the days of my life in an order of my choosing. So I'd like to have 3 days being a
Yeah.
7-year-old, and then have a bit of the retirement home, and then come back and have during my like sex
Yeah.
years. It's like
What,
what indeed? Why
yeah.
anything? I
Well,
mean, it's
while
yeah,
we've been talking, I've been trying to remember the name of this guy. I think the last philosophy book I read, I can't remember the guy who wrote it about 10 years ago. Um, but he is he says that basically what we experience is a graphical user interface.
right.
When we see a lion, a lion isn't really like that. It's just like a desktop icon that makes
Yeah,
things easy
we
to
kind of
use.
impose an
It's quite a
experience.
nice analogy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, our our body, our neurons have created this as a really useful, handy way of it
Of
works, you
perceiving
know.
objects and entities in the
But
world.
we
Yeah.
shouldn't think that that's what the line is actually like in any way,
Right.
you know. It's,
Yeah. No, no, absolutely, absolutely. Good stuff, man. I would love to carry on talking, but I should go and sleep.